What the hell did I just watch? Video Power. I remember it quite fondly. And if you're like me, and I know I am, then when you think of Video Power, you think of the loud, chaotic game show, the insane, manic energy of Johnny Arcade, and of course, the run through the prize mall at the end of the show. Video Power was such a unique show that it existed in the only time something like that really could, and that was the golden years of 1990 to 1992. Sadly, a lot of people today don't know about it, or they only recall fragments like a half forgotten dream. My goal for this video is to keep the memory of Video Power alive and to share the good news that is the magic of this show with old fans of Video Power and new ones alike. And also just to provide a glimpse into what things were like in the world of video game culture in the early 90s.
Call Hot Hints for the best Nintendo strategies.
Oh, I give up.
Don't give up. Call 1-900-HOT-HINTS and supercharge your game.
Cool. I can select all my favorite games.
There's hundreds of action-packed hints full of secret passwords on all the latest Nintendo games.
Hot Hints is fast, fun, and it's $1.65 a minute. Now I have the power.
Ask your parents before calling.
Now, even among those of us who remember the show, a lot of people are unaware that the first season of Video Power was very different than the game show format the show is famous for. And that first season was part live action video game magazine and part really, really shitty animated Captain N, the Game Master knockoff, with acclaimed characters called the Power Team. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into season 1 of Video Power, and we're going to see how it started first as a cynical money grab, essentially, and then ended up becoming legendary. So let's take a moment and rewind to the late 80s and see just how the stage was set to bring Video Power into existence.
Here's a hot flash from a previous Video Power.
In the late 80s and early 90s, video games were finally no longer seen as a passing fad. They had become part of the cultural zeitgeist. And I attribute a lot of this to the success of the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America. Because by 1988, the NES was a must-have for any household with kids. And a big reason behind this was due to the huge marketing push from Nintendo of America. One that they really stepped up in 1989. So, in 1989, not only was the feature film The Wizard released, which is famously a 90-minute commercial for Super Mario Bros. 3 using a video game competition as the framing device, but Nintendo had also launched two shows that were quite popular. There was the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, which aired in syndication, and a network, NBC, Saturday morning cartoon, Captain N and the Game Master. Super Mario Bros. Super Show had live action sketches before showing cartoons, and Captain N was about a kid who was so good at video games he got pulled into the ultimate warp zone to help defend Videoland from the evil Mother Brain. So this marketing push was so effective that at this point, if they hadn't already, video games in general started to become synonymous with Nintendo. The clueless parents who early in the decade would refer to every video game as an Atari were now calling every video game a Nintendo. A trend that really would last until about the sixth generation of consoles. So there was a huge gold rush around video games at this time, and not wanting to miss out, a company, Bobot Entertainment, which was an advertising and marketing company that focused primarily on the children's market, and they handled advertising buys for over 60 toy manufacturers. Saban Entertainment and video game publisher Acclaim all got together and decided to create their own version of Captain N that they would call Video Power. So the format of Video Power, it started with a mix of live action segments hosted by the ultimate cool gamer kid, Johnny Arcade, who would spotlight different video games, provide tips and tricks, talk about upcoming releases, that sort of thing. And then there would be an animated segment that was called the Power Team that would make up the bulk of the show. And all three of these companies were responsible for different aspects of the production. Bobot Entertainment would handle the live action Johnny Arcade segments. This was something they had some experience with. They'd already been getting into producing live action syndicated programming in 1989 with the teen talk show Girl Talk that was hosted by Soleil Moonfry of Punky Brewster fame. Saban Entertainment would produce the animated Power Team segments, and Acclaim would provide characters from their properties to be characters in the Power Team, as well as provide research data and, throw some money into creating the show. Now, unlike Captain N, the Power Team didn't involve Johnny Arcade getting pulled into the game world. In the cartoon, it was rather the characters from these Acclaim published games were being pulled into the real world. And then I guess the characters live with Johnny Arcade or something now. I don't know. But what characters, you may ask? Well, first, there was a punk rock tomato named Quirk who was apparently from a Game Boy game of the same name. And I remember seeing him in ads and stuff, but I always thought that he was from Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and they were just taking a hell of a lot of liberties with it. I don't know. Max Force, aka the blue guy from Narc, was also in the lineup, but he didn't look anything like Max Force from the game. He didn't have his SWAT team outfit. He didn't wear a helmet at all. Obviously, it was the kid show. He didn't have his guns. He was just some dude. But it was still pretty surprising to see characters from Narc in a children's cartoon. Mr. Big, Spike Rush, and Joe Rockhead, also from Narc, were the bad guys in it too. So a lot of the characters came from Narc. There was Kuros from Wizards and Warriors, who looked more like Fabio on the cover of Iron Sword than the knight in armor that you actually play as in the game. And then we got some really odd picks, like Tyrone from the basketball game Arch Rivals. Okay, now Narc, as violent as that game was, at least it makes a little sense for, pulling protagonists and antagonists from. But a character from Arch Rivals? Like, the whole point of that game, what makes it fun and memorable, was to engage in unsportsmanlike conduct. It's fun. And, yeah, all the characters had names, but they didn't really stand out. They weren't, different. There wasn't a protagonist in our Rivals. It was just your guys. And to have them as part of a crime fighting team? What's going on here? And it's not like any of the other characters in our Rivals are bad guys, so it just makes no sense. But here's a basketball guy, I don't know. And it does probably make a little more sense than the last member of the team, which is Bigfoot. And not Bigfoot the Sasquatch, I mean Bigfoot the monster truck, because Acclaim had a license to make a awful Bigfoot game for NES. And that has to be part of what the decision-making process was like. Acclaim had the Bigfoot license, so it was on the table. The team needs a form of transportation, so you know what? Let's just use Bigfoot. It has an NES game, after all. But you know what Bigfoot doesn't have in the game? A laser gun in his grill or in his lights, and the ability to talk. It was just weird. Especially if you're like me and you remember that Bigfoot already had a short-lived cartoon in the 80s that made a hell of a lot more sense, called Bigfoot and the Muscle Machines, where Bigfoot was simply just a monster truck. Yeah. He was there. He was, a focus, but it was what Bigfoot actually is. Anyway. But, we can't forget about Johnny Arcade. He was there. He was in the cartoon, too. But he didn't go on missions with them. Whenever we'd see Johnny Arcade, and it was very little in each episode, but he was just talking to them from his room, like over the radio or his computer or something. And he would occasionally use a joystick that was, it looked like, but just different enough for legal purposes and NES Advantage to drive Bigfoot sometimes. Only sometimes. Even though Bigfoot in this cartoon was a sentient monster truck and didn't need that. And he would kind of give orders to the team, like tell them what to do, or tell Bigfoot to jump or some use some ability here and there. I don't know. He didn't really do anything or add much to it, so why use Johnny Arcade? Especially if he's just sitting in his room instead of being this high energy, cool cat video game wizard. Like, he didn't seem to have any sort of special abilities or real connection to them. He's just kind of there. So if you're just going to have somebody sitting in the room, why not have some kid in a wheelchair? You know, you score some diversity points, but if he's not doing anything but yapping into a microphone and playing with his joystick, at least if he's in a wheelchair on the second floor of his suburban home, it would make a bit of narrative sense that he wouldn't be as involved with the team. But I guess it was just a way to connect it to the live action character of Johnny Arcade somehow. Bring the whole thing together. But I can't even tell if the voice actor of the cartoon Johnny Arcade was the same actor as the live action Johnny Arcade. So, I mean, if the real Johnny Arcade, Stevie Pekoski, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But if he had voiced the cartoon of Johnny Arcade, at least that would make a little more sense to tie it in. But I can't confirm this. IMDb has Stevie Pekoski listed for Video Power 3 times as Johnny Arcade host, Johnny Arcade 1990 to 1992, and then one more time Johnny Arcade. And okay, he was in every episode of both seasons of the show. Johnny Arcade made the show. Like, that Video Power and Johnny Arcade are synonymous almost. And so if we're looking at the listing on IMDb with 3 times, we could break it into like, one, yes, he was Johnny Arcade for the entire run of the series. 2, he was Johnny Arcade in the live action host segments of season 1. And 3, he also voiced Johnny Arcade in the cartoon. Okay, I can get with that. But in the season 1 credits, while Stevie Pekoski is listed as Johnny Arcade, the Power Team segment has its own credits, and when that rolls, he's not listed as part of the voice talent at all. And it doesn't say who was what characters in those credit cards. So it's possible that might not even be the real Johnny Arcade voicing Johnny Arcade. Either that, or they just didn't want to put his name in twice, since he already has like his own special title credits card on there because he's the star. But anyway, getting back to the cartoon itself, you're just sort of dropped in and expected to know who these people are. But you're not going to. Even if you're familiar with the games, except for the tomato guy, maybe, because he's the only one that's like an actual character that has character. Everybody else is interchangeable, and I mean, I guess obviously Bigfoot. But anybody else, like Tyrone, could have been from Double Dribble. Just some basketball guy. I mean, Kuros could have just been Conan. Max Ford, just some dude. I don't know. And with most of these syndicated shows back in the day, they, like, especially the kid shows, they didn't get like premieres. They just show up one day suddenly in the same time slot of something else you watched that either got moved to a different time slot or ended up being dropped completely. So when they would show up, you didn't know if you were seeing something that was just starting or if it had already been going for a while. And, I got to hand it to Video Power because in season 1, in that very first episode, they at least tried to handle this. Right there, in the first episode, Johnny Arcade introduces the cartoon. This is the first time on TV, the first episode of the Power Team, and he talks about all the characters in it during the live action segment. He's doing his best to get us up to speed. These are the good guys. They're from these games. These are the bad guys. But what he fails to mention is anything to do with the premise behind it. What are they all doing together? Why are they there? What do they want? And the intro kind of gives you clues, like this is where we get these characters are now in the real world, because it shows cartoon Johnny Arcade sitting at his computer or TV or whatever, looking shocked, playing these games as the characters all come out of the screen, which is really funny when Quirk the Tomato is on there, because he's from a Game Boy game, so we get to see Johnny Arcade in 1990 playing a Game Boy game on the TV. But there you go. But it stops there. It never says, are these characters like looking to get back, or they there, what happened? I mean, apparently, like, the bad guys came out. You don't see that, or at least the bad guys from Narc. But they're doing a crime, what do they want? And apparently Mr. Big from Narc has like the game cartridges that these characters came from, and he can use them to like zap the characters with them, that will send them back to their individual video game worlds. But it's like, don't they want to get back? And then, like, you see, he has them. He's holding them up. He's about to zap them. But then, in the first episode, Bigfoot and Quirk show up, and he gets scared. They're pelting him with tomatoes. But it's like, why don't you just zap them, too? You have the game cards, right? So, like, I guess it doesn't work. And I mean, they have confrontations, but like, he never does it. And there's no more details about this. There's absolutely no consistency in the story at all. And yeah, I know it's a kid's cartoon. I'm not expecting high art. I'm not expecting Shakespeare here, but just basic storytelling. Like, you have to have motivations, stakes. It has to somehow track logically. It doesn't. And, and that brings me to the other thing. So not only does live action Johnny, when he's setting up the show, he doesn't explain any of this. He just tells you these are the characters and Mr. Big is the bad guy, blah, blah, blah. But I just find this weird more than anything else. But he never mentions that he's in it. He doesn't make any self-references to being in the cartoon at all or having anything to do with the Power Team. And you would think, because in the live action, the idea is he's sitting there watching the cartoon segment on TV with us. And you would think, he's like, oh yeah, I'm watching. Oh yeah, and by the way, I was in this. Like, are you presenting this as adventures you've had with them? Like, that adds to the character of Johnny Arcade that we see in live action? Or, like, is this what's happening when you're not there giving us video game tips? Or is this just like a fictional thing? But you would think, like, hey, I'm Johnny Arcade. I'm cool video game wizard. Fuck you, Jimmy Woods. I'm in a cartoon. He's going to tell us that. He's like, isn't that cool? Oh yeah, that's fun. I'm super stoked. But there's no reference to him being there at all from him, and I just found that really, really weird. And just like, the whole thing is just shockingly bad writing. Just even as a kid, I found it so insultingly bad. It's just insulting to your intelligence. And the animation of it, well, that sucked too. So, like I said before, Saban Entertainment was responsible for the production of the animated segments. And you know what? For all of the amazing and memorable cartoon theme songs he made in the 80s, I guarantee you, pretty much your favorite 80s cartoon theme songs that you remember to this day was written and performed by Haim Saban. But for all of that, Haim Saban really hates spending money unless it's paying off members of Congress to put Israel's interests ahead of America's. So he went and hired Deke to do the animation. And Deke was known and notorious for two things. Number one, having a hand in practically every cartoon in the 80s and 90s, and having really, really cheap, shitty animation. And there's just simply nothing good about the Power Team at all. It's bad animation, bad voice acting. The writers clearly had no clue what they were doing, or they just didn't care. And nobody higher up seemed to care about what they were doing either. But, as bad as the Power Team segments were, Video Power Season 1 did have a lot of good stuff. The live action parts with Johnny Arcade were good. They were entertaining. And some of like the previews, they were very surface level and sounded just like press releases basically, but they were actually interesting. And they would show us things that wouldn't necessarily get coverage in other places. Like, I never saw anything else give coverage to Psychosis for the TurboGrafx 16, but Video Power Season 1 did, you know? And, you know, the set design of Johnny Arcade's pad, it was pretty cool. It had like a high-tech Pee-wee's Playhouse vibe to it. It just looked neat. And at this point, in those live action segments, the show was trying to be an actual video game magazine style program. And they would do sketches, but like Johnny Arcade goes to a game expo, shows off new games, pay visits to different developers, and do short little interviews in character with them, and be kind of goofy. And it was fun. It was interesting. And through those, we got to see a very crucial evolution of the character Johnny Arcade throughout season 1, as he starts, you know, very restrained, but then loosens up as it goes on and moves more in the direction of that manic, high energy game show host that we would come to know and love in season 2. Video Power had an initial $10 million production budget for season 1. And they were expecting to net around $15.6 million in yearly advertising revenue. Bobot, making the pitch for the show, they were guaranteeing at least a 6 rating for the program to different companies willing to advertise with it. And Video Power had been picked up in 38 of the top 40 markets in the country. So well before, you know, the sales season was over and before the show had aired, you know, this was going out, and 87% of their national advertising inventory had been sold. And so if you're watching old episodes of Video Power, you see commercials for, you know, like the national advertising. Those 30-second spots averaged a cost between $10,000 and $12,000. Now, that $15.6 million, that's just what they were expecting from national advertising campaigns. There isn't anything I could find about like how much promotional considerations would have been paid in the show itself. Like how much a company would pay to have their new game featured on Video Power. And, you know, like I said, there were a lot of previews of games, things that sounded like they were press releases. And, you know, as bad as video game journalism is nowadays, back then, there was a lot of payola going around in the video game press. So, speaking of payola, when The Wizard dropped in 1989, parents groups lost their collective minds. They called it a 90-minute commercial for Nintendo, which it was. But it was also a movie. And as kids, we were like, yeah, no shit. That's why we want to see it. We don't care. Like, the Nintendo stuff is the draw of the movie. You know? Commercials like this, as kids, we're interested in stuff. Commercials, ads, they were basically how we got our news about, like, the stupid shit we were interested in. Super Mario Bros. 3 was a massive event, and The Wizard was giving us our first look at it. Of course it was an ad, but it was an ad that we wanted to see. And to me, all, and I'm using air quotes here, entertainment news is advertising. Even back then, it was all highly controlled press releases, things sent out, say this, not this, payola, payola, payola. But, activists, they were pushing back hard on this sort of thing, because in the 80s, we had, a whole decade of deregulation from the FCC around, restrictions on children's television program. And that gave us a golden age of cartoons, right? But these jerks wanted stricter rules again. So in 1990, Congress passed the Children's Television Act of 1990. So networks now had to prove they were providing educational content, not just toy and game commercials disguised as shows. Nothing, can't have entertainment, especially if it's like a toy that kids want to play with. So this had broadcasters and productions pretty scared, rightfully so. And this had an impact on shows like Captain N. So even though we all knew what that N in Captain N stood for, the show was very, very careful to never, ever say Nintendo in it. And I think when it came to Video Power, they knew that at its core, the entire show was an advertisement. Captain N could at least say there were some original characters in there, right? Like the princess. She wasn't from any gang. Captain N was his own thing, but the Power Team couldn't do that. The Power Team was blatantly product placement, and so were the host segments with the reviews. And again, like, I could make a strong argument that regardless if it was paid for or not, there were value in those live action segments, like for the tips. They were cool. We were all better off getting magazines where we could get a lot more tips and read them and have them there. But like I said, I can't think of any other place that would give coverage to Psychosis for the TurboGrafx 16 outside of Video Power. They showed off the the SNK Neo Geo MVS cabinet with like the Neo Geo memory card and how you could save your progress in a game using a Neo Geo memory card. Nobody else was really talking about that. They showed a lot of cool stuff, a lot of upcoming things like, hey, and it wasn't really advertising. It was just like, this is out there. Take a look at this. And all of this, it is pure speculation on my part, but I feel like there was a combination of regulatory pressures with, everything from the Children's Television Act being passed when it was and the show coming out, combined with the Power Team, which was the core of the show, being a complete joyless turd of a cartoon, is what led them to change course and start retooling the show before season 1 even ended. So season 1 of Video Power had 33 episodes, but they only produced 26 episodes of the Power Team, meaning that Power Team episodes that had already aired were recycled into the new unaired live action segments. And those live action segments would even continue into season 2 in the early episodes. So the writing must have been crystal clear and all over the wall that this wasn't working. And remember, Acclaim was providing research data. So if we take that to mean running focus groups and doing market research on what our target demographic likes, one also must assume that they were responding to an overwhelming amount of negative feedback for the power team.
We want you to tell us what you think and be honest, because no one from the show is here spying on you. Now, you each have a knob in front of you. When you like what you see, turn the knob to the right. When you don't like what you see, turn it left.
My knob tastes funny.
Please refrain from testing the knob.
Hey! It's tomatoes, you jerk! Tomatoes! 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 Tomatoes!
Spike! Joe, get him!
Mommy!
And I also think that they probably got a lot of feedback that said, one, Johnny Arcade needs to be louder, angrier, and have access to a time machine. And two, whenever Johnny Arcade's not on screen, all the other people should be asking, where's Johnny Arcade? So, by the end of season 1, it was clear the power team had no juice, but Johnny Arcade and what he was doing resonated with the audience. So, thankfully, the showrunners got this message loud and clear. Drop the cartoon, let's crank Johnny's energy to 11, let him run wild, and rebuild the show around what kids that were tuning in actually cared about, the actual games. And the result of that was giving us Video Power Season 2, which was a daily game show version of Video Armageddon from the Wizard. And yes, that was exactly what we wanted. And that is the version of Video Power that we all remember. The manic Johnny Arcade, the tips, the head-to-head NES matches, and of course, the run through the game prize mall. And that is what I'm going to be covering in part 2. So if you want to get the Video Power Edge, go ahead, hit that like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Make sure you hit that bell and turn on notifications, because the best is still to come. And that is Video Power.